He accidentally dropped the fork, and immediately, dinner ended in tension. His stepfather didn't let it slide, slammed the door, and taught him a lesson through violence. His biological mother knew what was happening, but she was powerless, believing that the beatings would make him more obedient. After each ordeal, Eric had to reluctantly shake hands and make peace with the man who had just tortured him. The beatings happened so often that violence became a regular part of his life, causing his resentment to steadily grow. The anger that had been building up inside Eric gradually erupted into violent behavior. He began beating up his classmates, unhesitatingly injuring them in a complete loss of control. To those around him could only watch, too afraid to intervene because of Eric's reputation for being violent. He became increasingly involved in fights until the principal could no longer tolerate it. After the final altercation, he called Eric to his office and immediately made the decision to expel him, ending any tolerance for his misbehavior. Eric didn't pay much attention to the principal's threats as he left, while his mother had sold some of the family's artwork to set up a fund for him, hoping he could finish his studies. She advised Eric to meet her friend Gunnar, a lawyer. Gunnar gave Eric his business card and told him to call if he needed help. Eric, confused, just stared at the card, unsure of what to say. After Gunnar left, his mother bluntly expressed her disappointment over his expulsion. Then she unexpectedly announced that she had enrolled him in an all-boys boarding school Starburg. This was his last chance, she emphasized, and she hoped Eric would take it seriously and not make the same mistakes again. Eric nodded, promising to do better this time. He swore he would graduate without getting expelled again. Upon arriving at the new school, Eric put on his uniform and had his hair neatly cut. His new roommate Pierre was the smartest student at the school, and the two quickly became close as Eric realized Pierre was very friendly and approachable. As night fell, Eric and Pierre hurried to the dining hall for dinner. There Eric met Johan, another student, who told him about the school's traditions. Johan explained that at this school, how others treat you completely depends on your social standing. Just as he finished speaking, Johan noticed a student sitting next to Eric being suddenly called by two others at the far end of the table. It was Otto and Alan, sons of wealthy noble families, while the student being called came from an ordinary family. Otto and Alan frequently bullied students who were less fortunate. They acted without care because their families had significant influence over the school, so they had no fear of being expelled. Furthermore, both of them were members of the student council, which gave them the power to punish other students without facing any obstacles. The next morning, during breakfast, Otto and Delay called Eric over, saying they wanted to welcome him with a traditional initiation ceremony for new students. However, Eric flatly refused, and the consequences of this decision fell on Johan. A car hit Johan, leaving him severely injured and requiring hospitalization that night. Meanwhile, Otto and Dylan continued preparing for another bullying session, this time targeting Eric. So they summoned him to their headquarters and ordered him to clean up the pile of dirty shoes on the floor. But Eric once again refused and immediately walked away. Furious, Dylan turned to Otto, asking how they should deal with Eric. Otto remained calm, telling Dylan to leave Eric alone for a while. Later, Eric recounted everything to Pierre. Pierre's face suddenly tensed as he listened to Eric's story. He warned him not to continue defying Otto and Dylan, as students who didn't obey them often faced severe punishment. But Eric, who had once been a bully himself, dismissed the warning, declaring that he wasn't afraid of them and would never follow any orders from those two. That night, Eric and Pierre discussed ways to fight back against Otto and Dylan's bullying without resorting to violence, but it seemed almost impossible. So most of the students at the school would rather obey than endure the bruising pain of being beaten. The next day, while walking down the school hallway, Dylan accidentally bumped into Eric. Elaine demanded that Eric apologize, but Eric refused, feeling he hadn't done anything wrong since it was Dylan who ran into him. This angered Dylan, and he challenged Eric to a fight at a designated spot that evening. Pierre and Johan accompanied Eric to the meeting place. Pierre didn't forget to warn Eric that Otto and Dylan never played fair. They always brought along their friends to gang up on their opponents. That night, Eric initially planned to accept Dylan's challenge and face him, but he changed his mind when he remembered his mother's advice to behave properly in order to graduate and return to school. In his room, Pierre helped him calm his nerves. Meanwhile, Otto and Dylan continued to wait at the designated spot, stretching out for hours. When Eric didn't show up, Otto smugly concluded that Eric was too weak to confront him, mocking him as a coward. with the encouragement of his followers. When the next day, Otto publicly criticized the students who didn't follow the student council's orders, with Eric at the top of the list. In a mock trial, Otto, as the student council president, sentenced Eric to a month of hard labor, ordering him to dig a 1-meter deep trench around the school. Eric worked through the night on the trench, but he couldn't complete the task on time and had to eat dinner alone in the hallway. While Eric was eating, Maria, a cafeteria worker, approached him. She seemed amused when Eric said that he reminded her of her brother. Maria continued to explain that, like Eric, her brother also had a defiant attitude, always refusing to bow down to authority. After the meal, Maria unexpectedly appeared again. She advised him to take care of his health. Then, Maria suddenly kissed and hugged Eric. Both of them understood that a romantic relationship between students and staff was strictly prohibited at the school, and the consequences would be severe. Eric could be expelled, and Maria would be fired immediately. However, that night, neither Eric nor Maria cared about the rules. During the Christmas break, when Eric returned home, his mother greeted him warmly, but his stepfather was cold. He immediately interrogated Eric about the punishments he had received, including being suspended from school. Eric straightforwardly replied that he had refused to obey the orders of another student, who just so happened to be the son of a powerful aristocratic family at the school. His stepfather mocked Eric's explanation, claiming that the son of an aristocratic family should be respected and obeyed, and criticized him for his poor grades and the punishments he had endured. Eric's stepfather beat him again, while his mother, despite knowing the pain her son was going through, turned a blind eye. When the Christmas break ended, Eric returned to school. The first thing he did was rush to see Maria, because he had missed her so much. Under the moonlight, the two reunited, holding each other tightly, finding comfort in each other's arms. When Otto and Delan found out Eric was back at school, they came up with a plan for another prank. This time they intended to pour dirty water on Eric while he was sleeping. However, their plan failed. Eric and Pierre woke up immediately and quickly cleaned up the mess. This time Eric decided he wouldn't stay silent anymore. He wanted revenge. Taking advantage of the remaining space, Eric quietly snuck into Otto's room, turned off the lights, and poured dirty water on him while he was fast asleep. The next morning, in the dining hall, Eric deliberately spoke loudly so everyone could hear. "Look at this," he said, breathing dramatically, then began wandering around the room, pretending to follow a certain scent. Finally, he stopped right in front of Otto, who was eating breakfast. Eric loudly declared, "You filthy piece of garbage, listen up." Otto was so enraged that he lost control, his fury erupting as Eric humiliated him in front of everyone. Otto punched Eric hard in the face, but despite the blow, Eric didn't resist. He had promised his mother he would stay out of trouble. Meanwhile, the principal and teachers sat quietly at the table next to them, continuing to eat as if nothing was happening. Seeing this, Maria walked in and demanded that Otto stop, disappointed that she couldn't shake Eric's resolve. Unable to break Eric's spirit, Otto and Delan decided to change their target. This time, they set their sights on Pierre, Eric's roommate and his only friend at school. During lunch, Otto called Pierre over, but Pierre refused, insisting that he hadn't done anything wrong to Otto. However, Otto was not the type to give up easily. After the final class of the day, he challenged Pierre and threatened to punish him if he didn't participate. Otto and Alan deliberately targeted Pierre, hoping to provoke him into a confrontation that would force Eric to act. They knew Eric wouldn't stand by while his best friend was being bullied. Their goal was to make Eric feel compelled to join the That night, Pierre had no choice but to accept the challenge. He went to the battleground, where Otto, Delan, and their group were waiting. Pierre knew he would have to fight with all his might to resist their pressure and cruelty. Their physical capability seemed completely drained, and with just a light blow from Otto, Pierre collapsed to the ground. Eric couldn't believe his eyes as he saw his best friend lying there, humiliated and treated like a joke. By the time Eric arrived, it was too late to do anything. He could only carry Pierre back to their room and tend to his wounds. After ensuring Pierre was stable, Eric advised his friend to rest and left. That night, Eric met Maria. But the next morning, they were once again threatened. Worried about Pierre's condition, Eric hurried back to his room, unwilling to leave his friend's side any longer. When Eric returned to his room, he was stunned to find it empty. Pierre had disappeared, taking all his belongings, leaving behind a void that couldn't be filled. There was no doubt now his best friend had made the decision to leave and never return to school. Only one letter of apology remained on the bed, as a sudden farewell. In the letter, Pierre explained that Eric was his true friend and urged him not to give up. He also encouraged Eric to continue fighting against Otto and his followers, to put an end to the tyranny and injustice that had been rampant at the school. After reading the letter, Eric felt a strong determination rise within him. Finally, he had found his true purpose. He was determined to seek revenge for Pierre and the other students who had suffered under Otto's cruel hand. Without hesitation, Eric walked into the dining hall and confronted Dylan, boldly challenging him. He declared that he would fight Otto in the arena. 1 hour later, Eric found himself facing Elaine and von Schenin, two large and stronger opponents. Despite their size, both relied only on the power and influence of their parents. But Eric was not easily subdued. He quickly defeated them, taking both down to the ground in an instant. Then, he turned to Otto, who was stunned by how effortlessly Eric had taken down his strongest henchman. Eric challenged Otto, declaring that he would be the next to pay the price. However, before confronting Otto, Eric decided to search for Maria in the school kitchen. When he arrived, a female staff member informed him that Maria had been fired and had already left the school. The staff member handed Eric a letter from Maria, just like when Pierre had left. Eric felt a deep pain at the sudden loss of her. One of Otto's henchmen noticed Eric receiving the letter from the staff member. Not long after, Otto led his gang to raid Eric's room, ordering them to search through all his belongings. After rummaging through his things, they found Maria's letter. Otto read it, and immediately discovered the secret relationship between Eric and Maria. With the letter in hand, Otto now had the evidence to accuse and expel Eric. Without wasting any time, Otto quickly presented the evidence of Eric's wrongdoing to the principal. The principal summoned Eric, and without hesitation expelled him for serious misconduct, especially concerning Maria. Eric accepted the punishment calmly, but he requested that the principal return Maria's letter, as it was the only keepsake he had of her. However, the principal refused and locked the letter in his drawer. Determined to seek revenge for everything Otto had caused during his time at Starber, Eric had nothing left to lose. He was ready to face any challenge, even after being expelled. With nothing left to lose, Eric followed Otto's trail and found him walking alone in the woods. Faso saw the stick, pointing it directly at him and demanding that he kneel. Confronted by Eric's determination, Otto, in sheer panic, immediately knelt down. In desperation, Otto hastily handed Eric $10,000 as a bribe to save his life. However, Eric refused, ready to attack Otto. The boy was completely broken, crying and pleading for his life, even vomiting out of fear. Seeing this, Eric suddenly stopped, put his hands on Otto's face, and said that he would not kill him. He was not like Otto, who took pleasure in torturing others. After leaving Otto behind, Eric returned to the school to pack his things, preparing for a new turning point in his life. Then, Eric remembered Gunnar, the lawyer who had once advised him to reach out if he ever needed help. Without hesitation, he immediately called Gunnar. Shortly after, the lawyer arrived in Starberg. After Eric explained his situation, he decided to confront the principal, who was sitting in his office, drinking with some of the faculty. Eric firmly pleaded with him not to expel him from the school and demanded the return of Maria's letter. At first, the principal flatly refused, but at that moment, Gunnar entered the room and threatened to publicly expose the class discrimination culture and the bullying that the principal and the staff had deliberately ignored. With no other choice, the principal finally had to consent and agree to all of Eric's demands. He decided to disband the student council led by Otto. Eric was deeply grateful to Gunnar, as it was through his help that he was able to stay at the school and overthrow Otto's tyrannical rule, along with his supporters. The peaceful days passed by, and Eric enjoyed his school life until graduation. His mother was incredibly proud and joyful of Eric's achievements at Starberg. However, his stepfather remained dissatisfied, continuing to criticize Eric's behavior at school. When his stepfather prepared to hit Eric once again, Eric decided to resist, declaring that this would be the last time violence would occur in their family. Determined to end the oppression, Eric firmly kicked his stepfather out of the house. Sometime later, Eric was finally reunited with his friend, who was about to continue his studies in Geneva. They both promised to meet again one day in the near future.